Rick and Morty at first seemed like the average adult cartoon that was wacky for wacky's sake, but quickly turned into one that showcased some of the most mature themes of any animated show I've ever watched. On the channel, I've spoken about the two overarching villains of the show and how they've made an impact on our main characters, but in this video I wanted to talk about one of the main characters. A character so toxic that it affected the dynamic of her family multiple times. A character who craved her father's attention so much that it both figuratively and literally split her consciousness into two. A character who lost both her parents at a young age, resulting in her continuously questioning her identity until it crippled her. This is the story of Beth Smith, the burden of becoming. But before we continue, I want to take a quick second to talk about War Thunder. War Thunder is a free-to-play, epic, impactful, and immersive multiplayer action game where ground vehicles, aircraft, and naval ships, yes, naval ships, fight in incredible battles across locations around the world. What really sets it apart from other games is the scale. You're not locked into just one thing. One moment you're pushing forward in a tank, then you're covering your team from a helicopter, then the next fighting enemies in the water. The attention to detail is kind of insane. The game's graphics and sound design are constantly improving with every update, which makes every battle feel cinematic without losing that grounded feel. Now here's the thing. At first, I thought that the different vehicles would be just stat sheets, but I'm happy to say that each one has unique characteristics and abilities. It doesn't feel like assets are just copied and pasted. They're all incredibly unique. The best part for me is the customization. Every vehicle can be upgraded with new modules and personalized with skins. These will be your vehicles. Now, with the latest update, Line of Contact, War Thunder has entered a new level. For the first time, infantry arrives in War Thunder in a close testing mode, bringing ground troops to the game. Things are going to get deliciously chaotic. The update also introduces new vehicles like the Terminator combat vehicle, the Ajax tank, the Typhoon, and the Super Hornet. If you want to jump in, you can download War Thunder for free on PC, PlayStation, or Xbox using the links at the top of the description or the pinned comment. New players, and those who haven't played in a while, can also receive special bonuses, including 100,000 Silver Lions, the Eagle of Valor Decorator, and more. And let's say you want to take those massive battles with you anywhere. You can also play War Thunder Mobile, available for free on iOS and Android. Just use the mobile link in the description and jump straight into the chaos. With that out of the way, let's get back to the video. We begin in the pilot episode. Rick Sanchez is the smartest man in the known universe, who one day showed up back at his family's house after being gone for who knows how long. As a result, there's constant tension between his daughter Beth Smith and her husband Jerry. Rick loves taking his grandson Morty on adventures, which also means Morty's doing horribly in school. As a result, Jerry here wants to put his wife's father in a nursing home, citing that he's a bad influence on the kids. Beth, however, refuses because Rick is her father and she hasn't seen him for years. On top of that, she says that Morty's always been a sort of dumbass, and at least if he hangs out with Rick, he'll have a friend. Beth's reasoning falls flat quickly when Principal Vagina, no relation, calls them to a meeting and reveals that Morty has missed an entire semester of school, all because Rick always pulls him out. In the end, Beth and Jerry collectively decide to kick Rick out, but somehow through some nonsense, he convinces them that Morty's now a super genius, making him answer some difficult questions, with Jerry saying that regardless, Morty should still stay in school. The truth is, Morty answering those complex questions was a side effect of some science fiction-y bullshit from their adventure. Another thing I wanted to point out is this interaction between Beth and Jerry at the end of the episode.
And now, Beth, if you'll have me, I would love to have you.
You know what? Okay.
Now, while this is supposed to be a comedic dig at their relationship, it is the first indication that Beth and Jerry's marriage is extremely strained, something we'll see explored in the coming episodes. We also learn in this episode that Beth is a horse heart surgeon, not a real surgeon. I will get back to this distinction more after discussing all of season 1, as well as some comments from Dan Harmon, the creator, that further contextualize everything. We now arrive at Meeseeks and Destroy. Rick gives the family a Meeseeks box that can spawn these aliens called Meeseeks. Their purpose? To help them with any mundane task. The family ignores Rick's warning in keeping their request simple, and Beth decides to ask Mr. Meeseeks for help in becoming a complete woman. So they have lunch and she reveals that she got pregnant at 17 and then put herself through veterinary school. Yet she always found herself wanting more. Mr. Meeseeks says to her,
"Having a family doesn't mean that you stop being an individual. You know the best thing you can do for people that depend on you? Be honest with them, even if it means setting them free."
And she takes this as,
You're saying I should leave Jerry.
Now, I'm no therapist, but the way I interpreted Mr. Meeseeks' message is that Beth shouldn't drop all of her interests and hobbies just because she got a family. Yet the way she interpreted that is, I can't do that unless I leave my husband. That just shows that Beth deeply resents Jerry for getting her pregnant at 17. After this, Beth gets a new haircut, and after Jerry doesn't notice it, she becomes really cold to him. Eventually, they go out to dinner, where she says she wants to go on a trip that she always always talked about. This scene is cut short by an army of Meeseeks coming after Jerry because he couldn't take 2 strokes off his golf game. In the end, Beth helps him complete it, and she says that despite them not having a perfect marriage, she's not going anywhere.
I got you pregnant.
Yeah.
So despite Beth choosing to accept her circumstance, that final line shows that this still isn't enough to get over her resentment. Unfortunately, this conflict continues in the most important episode of the entire show, Rick Potion number 9. Rick inadvertently, or deliberately as future events would suggest, infects the entire world, resulting in him and Morty moving into a new universe. While all that shit is going down, Jerry gets jealous of Beth's coworker and decides to head to the hospital to stop a potential affair. We also get this important piece of dialogue between them.
Loving you is work, Jerry. Hard work. Like building a homeless shelter. Nobody wants to say no to doing it, but some people put the work in. So what do you say? Do you see me working here? Does this conversation seem tedious to me?
Sort of.
Then I obviously sort of love you, don't I?
Nasty work. The apocalypse then starts, and the two, after overcoming insane odds, try to live out the rest of their days together. Now, despite what is said in the post-credit scene,
Ever wonder what happened to Rick and Morty?
Sometimes. But I'm ashamed to admit, now that they're gone, I'm finally happy.
I actually think this further supports how toxic their relationship is, at least during this time. It's clear the episodes leading up to this were hinting at the two getting a divorce, but now, because of the apocalypse, the two find solace in staying together. Doesn't that also mean they're kind of forced to be together? I'll leave this one up to you guys. Maybe it's to show that in the direst of circumstances, we reveal our true desires and true colors. So maybe this highlights that they truly are endgame, but it could also mean that since everyone's pretty much dead, they might as well stay together. Again, let me know what you guys think down below. Beth's last line also foreshadows Rick's toxic influence on her, that somehow, despite her saying she was glad to have him back after being gone for so long, she finds true happiness with him being gone. In the episode 60 Minutes, Rick introduces the family to interdimensional cable, and they view a universe where Jerry's a movie star. He then gives Jerry, Beth, and Summer these goggles that can view alternate reality versions of themselves. In that same universe Jerry became a celebrity, we learned that Beth became an actual heart surgeon. I'll let Skips take this one.
No good can come of this.
The worst part is, whenever they view a universe where they're doing some insanely cool shit, Summer doesn't exist, leading Beth to say this wild line.
Well, you should select a different timeline. I mean, if your father and I achieved our dreams, there's a chance you weren't even born.
This shows the core issue plaguing Beth this season. This is the mindset that births a toxic relationship. While I can empathize with her setting aside all of her interests and hobbies after becoming pregnant, after all, it's a huge responsibility to raise a kid at such a young age, this can only lead to one thing: resentment for Jerry. Viewing these alternate timelines obviously causes a huge argument, with the two of them blaming each other for their unhappiness. Jerry also reveals that they had originally planned an abortion, but he was the one who talked her out of it. Summer obviously gets hurt listening to this, with Beth telling her own daughter she should be grateful.
What a monster!
After Summer decides to pack up and leave, the two of them realize that being together just for the kids is only gonna make their lives worse, and they decide to get a divorce. But then something wild happens. Jerry walks into the living room, and Rick and Morty come across that same timeline where Jerry's a celebrity. Only this time, he's gone off the rails and is being chased by the cops. The family is obviously confused as hell, wondering where he's going. All the while, Beth drowns her sorrow in wine in the kitchen, viewing her alternate reality. She then hears the doorbell go off in this reality, and when she opens it, she sees celebrity Jerry, who professes his love for her and says that he hates his current life, wondering what might have been if she hadn't got an abortion. And so the two of them, after viewing their alternate reality selves in tandem, embrace each other, realizing that maybe they really are meant for each other. It's actually a really profound conclusion to the episode, showing that their love transcends realities. But as we'll see, this does not put an end to their relationship issues. Also, really quickly, if you're new around here, please subscribe, and if you enjoy the video, please consider hitting that like button. A majority of you who watch my videos are not subscribed. And just quickly, I really wanted to thank all of you for 200,000 subscribers. It's a milestone I never thought I would hit, especially this quickly, and it motivates me even more to continue uploading all kinds of essays on games, movies, shows, and creating these big character analysis videos for you guys. Don't worry, much more content is planned for this year, and I'll continue uploading regularly, so subscribe to keep up to date. With that, let's get to the video. Now, I wanted to discuss what Dan Harmon had to say about Beth during the first season. It seems like she'd rather her son risk risk his life with her insane father than end up being like her husband. That's really f***ed up. Beth thinks her dad is better than her mother because her dad had the brain and guts to leave her. What Harmon speaks about here is a deification of her father, Rick. She's completely okay with her insane grandfather pretty much raising her own son, just as long as Morty doesn't end up as an unemployed Joe Schmo like Jerry. He also goes on to say that Beth blames her own mother for Rick leaving, which makes it even more toxic. In truth, we as the audience know how Rick is. The worst part is she doesn't even know at this point that he abandoned his own daughter in a world he destroyed. But judging by Harmon's comments, Beth in her own way might actually admire that of him. We'll get more into Beth's relationship with Rick as the seasons go on. He also talks about how Beth becoming a horse heart surgeon rather than a human heart surgeon plays into this dynamic. The idea is that if she hadn't gotten pregnant, she might have pursued a more difficult career path. And I don't want to downplay that choice. Becoming a horse surgeon is still an enormous amount of work. But what Harmon seems to be suggesting isn't that Beth chose an easier job, it's that she chose a different version of herself. It wasn't that she just compromised on a career. She compromised on who she imagined she could become, and that's something she quietly resents about herself. At least that's my take on the situation. We now arrive at season 2, and I'll briefly discuss A Wrinkle in Time. After Jerry accidentally hits a deer, Beth, despite being a horse heart surgeon, insists on trying to save it. Instead of accepting that she has a different field of expertise, she feels the need to prove to herself that she's capable of more. This moment taps directly into her quiet resentment about becoming a horse surgeon rather than a human one. In the end, she does save the deer, which might look noble on the surface, but we know the real reason why she did this. Beth isn't driven purely by compassion for the deer, she's driven by the need to validate her own worth. Big Trouble in Little Sanchez follows up on Beth and Jerry's relationship. Rick takes them to space therapy, where these intergalactic shrinks hook the pair up to a machine that projects the version of their partner as they see them. Oh look, Bill Cipher cameo. Jerry perceives Beth as this terrifying xenomorph monster, while Beth views Jerry as this slimy worm. Dean here says that these relationships that exist in their head are not real and are deeply dysfunctional. Key point, the relationship between these monsters / projections are not functional. But you see, Beth and Jerry's projections start working together and manage to escape.
Oh dear God, no.
They're codependent!
Dean tells them to their face that they are a horrible couple and should never have gotten together. What this truly shows about their relationship is that they didn't choose each other out of love. They chose each other as coping mechanisms. The way I see it, for Beth, Jerry softens her fear of wasted potential, and for Jerry, Beth softens his fear of being disposable. Eventually, the two get stranded on the planet, and Beth gets kidnapped by Xenomorph Beth. She decides to create an army of slimy Jerrys to take over the world. This again highlights how Beth tends to view Jerry less as a partner and more as a tool to serve her own needs. While this is an exaggerated projection, it still reveals something real about how Beth sees her. Some insane nonsense goes down, and the two decide to keep their marriage going a while longer.
At least until Morty has graduated high school.
Well, that's never happening in this show. In the season 2 finale, the family goes to Bird Person's wedding, where it's revealed his wife Tammy is an undercover spy for the Galactic Federation, which causes everything to go to shit. And I mean everything. Rick here is a wanted man by the Federation, and seeing him at the wedding means that Earth is now swarming with them. So the family decides to migrate, and they find Tiny World, which, as you guessed it, is extremely tiny. So tiny, in fact, that when Rick goes out exploring, he eventually finds himself directly below the family's cabin, where Jerry goes off. He proposes that they turn Rick into the government. The rest of the family is not down, but Jerry makes a good point, stating that they are sacrificing their entire life for someone who wouldn't think twice about them.
For the rest of your lives, no matter how much it hurts you, no matter how much it destroys our children's futures, we're gonna do whatever Rick wants, whenever he wants.
Yes!
Why?
Because I don't want him to leave again, you dumb asshole!
This line echoes something Harmon pointed out earlier. Beth's deepest fear is being abandoned again, after spending years living with the idea that both of her parents had left her. Combined with the way she idolizes Rick, she's never able to fully accept that her father is a toxic presence, not just for her children, but for herself as well. Rick, hearing this, decides to leave and turn himself in, with Morty telling him that he can handle it if Rick leaves, but it will crush Beth, and he won't forgive him for that. It's an extremely powerful scene that unfortunately does not change Rick's mind. He turns himself in, leaving Beth and the rest of the family completely distraught. The season 3 premiere shows Earth under the control of the Galactic Federation, with strict curfews and constant surveillance. Beth tries to shut down any mention of Rick, fully aware that she's been idolizing him, yet she can't stop herself from drinking and breaking down over the fact that her father has left her once again. In the end, because Rick's a f***ing monster, he escapes prison and collapses the government, causing things to go back to normal. The funny part is, just before that, Jerry and Beth have this, what you would call a nice moment.
Are we ever ever going to stop paying for indulging your father, our children, our planet, our jobs? Is there anything left to lose?
Just each other, and I'll never let you go, and I'm so sorry I ever did this to us.
But then Rick shows up a second later and...
Please don't leave me again.
I never will, baby.
Well, Beth truly did not learn her lesson of deifying her effed up father. Jerry decides to put his foot down for once and says to Beth,
It's him or me.
this leads to Beth and Jerry finally getting a divorce. A long time coming, to be honest. This will play a huge role for Beth going forward this season. We now arrive at one of the best episodes in the show, Pickle Rick. Rick turns himself into a pickle to get out of family therapy. He then says this extremely manipulative thing to Beth.
But, I mean, your mom could put me in a purse or a pocket, if she really needs me to go.
Nobody needs anything, okay? It's fine.
He knows Beth would make that response, feeding on her own insecurities. Morty then notices a syringe placed directly above Pickle Rick that would drop in exactly 5 minutes, about the exact time they would have left for therapy. He denies that it would turn him back into human, so Beth takes it with him since it would just impale him otherwise. Now the question is, why are they going to family therapy? Well, it's because Morty peed his pants in school and Summer huffed enamel. Upon arriving, Dr. Wong, the therapist, directs the conversation more toward Beth and her relationship with Rick. Obviously, this pisses Beth off, and we get to see more of her toxic side. Morty and Summer are certain that the syringe above Rick was anti-pickle serum, but Beth is in extreme denial. So Wong sees right through her bullshit and dismantles Beth.
I think it's possible that you and your father have a very specific dynamic. I don't think it's one that rewards emotion or vulnerability. I think it may punish them. I think it's possible that dynamic eroded your marriage and is infecting your kids with a tendency to misdirect their feelings.
This is something we've seen in glimpses. It's Rick who showed Jerry and Beth alternate realities, causing the two to resent each other even more. Although they made up at the end of that episode, it didn't stop them from having issues. It is also confirmed in the season 3 premiere that one of Rick's motivations for turning himself in was to get Jerry out of the family.
Fuck you.
Mom!
Fuck both of you too.
Beth later says that her father won't even need the syringe because he can just make more.
He doesn't need anything from anyone.
You admire him for that.
It's better than making your problems other people's problems.
This line speaks directly to Beth's upbringing. She was forced to fend for herself after her parents disappeared, and because she idolized her father for f***ing off, she learned to associate emotional distance with strength. The problem is that Beth isn't Rick. She cares deeply about her children, and whether she wants to admit it or not, she cares about Jerry too. So instead of letting herself feel that vulnerability, she tries to compensate by acting like an asshole. In fact, we see her try to act like Rick this entire episode. When Pickle Rick admits that the syringe would have turned him back to normal and later apologizes for lying, it becomes a rare moment of honesty between them. Their decision to get a drink together becomes the real step toward Beth and Rick trying to rebuild their relationship, something we get more insight into in the episode The ABCs of Beth. The episode opens with Beth watching a news report about some guy who's getting executed for eating his own son, Tommy. Tommy was Beth's childhood friend. For years, she convinced herself that he had simply vanished into her imaginary world, Fruipyland. I love the moment when Rick overhears this from the living room. Not long after, he reveals that Fruipyland was real and that Tommy might still be there. The two return to it together, with Beth unloading years of anger on Rick for choosing to create this world over parenting, a world where she could have easily gotten hurt. Of course, Rick shows her that he designed Fruipyland to be extremely safe. That is, until they encounter creatures that are genuinely dangerous, leaving Rick badly injured. After killing one of them, he inspects their DNA, only for Beth to say,
Are you saying Tommy survived here by having sex with Fruipy creatures, creating Fruipy human hybrid offspring, and then consuming their proteins, sustaining himself with an endless cycle of cannibalistic incest?
100% daughter of the smartest man in the universe. So they meet King Tommy, who shows them a play of how he ended up in this world. He explicitly states that Kid Beth pushed her into some honey and stranded him there. Rick, not wanting to deal with the shit show this is, leaves instantly, and the two have an interesting conversation. Beth, in classic fashion, is in denial over throwing Tommy into some honey, with Rick saying he fully believes him. Why? Well, he reveals that Beth, when she was a child, was super f***ing scary, like unhinged levels of insane. Rick shows her the kinds of abhorrent shit she used to ask for as a child, which for some reason was always something insanely violent. The reason most, if not every Rick in the multiverse created Fruipyland for their Beth was to keep Beth contained and prevent the outside world from becoming his problem. We'll get more insight into this in a future episode. Anywho, Beth says that the reason she even asked him to make these things was so she could spend time with him, and that if, keyword, if she did try to kill Tommy, it was because she was jealous of his family. The amount of cope is diabolical. So to prove to herself that all of this is Rick's fault, she goes in and tries to take Tommy back to the real world. Tommy accuses her of pushing him, but she coldly says that he fell into some honey. And then she says,
Tommy, I'm sorry you think you deserve an apology. Oh my God, I'm my father.
Okay, Beth, I'm sorry you think you deserve an apology.
So using the tools Rick made for her when she was a kid, she goes on a massive killing spree, and you can see clearly she enjoys herself. She returns a few moments later and asks Rick if he can clone Tommy. He agrees, then asks if she wants to help. In the end, they manage to reunite Tommy with his family, and his father is spared. It's the final few moments of the episode that are arguably the most important for Beth's character. She says to Rick that she's always seen him as a good guy and often tries to be like him. The ugly truth, however, is that
I'm not that great a guy and you're exactly like me.
Beth realizes she can no longer hide behind her past to justify who she's become, especially after seeing how she reacted to Tommy in Fruppyland.
Who am I? What do I do?
Rick tells her she should just leave and let the universe take her for a spin, wherever it wants. She doesn't want to since she feels responsible for the kids, but Rick then suggests cloning her. The clone would have the same memories, the same emotions, everything. If Beth ever decided to come back, Rick could simply shut the clone off, and it would be as if she never left. Beth looks at the fridge covered in photos of her family and realizes what she wants to do. Because of this scene, it feels like she chose to stay, but we're not given a clear answer in this episode, and that's the point. Beth being stuck at a metaphorical crossroads is central to her character. There were two key moments in her life where she had no choice. It wasn't her choice that her parents disappeared, forcing her to fend for herself, and it wasn't her choice to get pregnant at 17. These two events shaped her fundamentally. That's why these lines matter so much.
I don't know if I can do it.
Then stay and luxuriate in a life you can finally know you've chosen.
In the end, the choice itself doesn't matter, only that it's hers. Or at least that's what I thought when I first watched this episode. As we later learn, what actually happened off screen is far more tragic. In the season 3 finale, Beth, after taking Summer shopping, begins to doubt her existence, thinking that she's a clone. Calling Rick and asking him about it does not help whatsoever, leading her to get even more paranoid. So she decides to go to Jerry. Up to this point, Jerry has mostly been useless, but here we get a genuinely sweet moment between him and Beth. He tries to recreate one of their senior year dates, the night they shared their first kiss. Jerry believes she isn't a clone, but Beth admits that she always hated that memory, solidifying to herself that she's the clone, because right now she enjoyed it. Yet she says she feels grateful that someone like Jerry loves her. Amazing how she still can't fully accept that she may have loved him at one point, clone or not. As we've seen time and time again, Beth is stubborn and often in denial about her own feelings. Soon after, the family escapes to a cabin in the middle of nowhere, away from Rick, with Morty telling him that Beth and Jerry are getting back together and that he shouldn't follow them. Summer then says,
I told you we shouldn't have gone to the same cabin as last time.
That line always confused me because it implies the family once ran away from Rick to this exact cabin off screen. For years, I assumed she was talking about the Tiny Planet cabin, but that doesn't quite track, especially since Rick shows up moments later using a government teleporter. As far as I can tell, the show never gives us a clear answer. Beth tries to reason with Rick, explaining that killing her would destroy the family rather than fix anything. He says that he actually brought the gun to kill Jerry and not Beth, saying,
Beth, you crazy bitch, you're my daughter.
The season ends with Beth saying that things are going to be like season 1 again, but less complicated and more streamlined. Poor choice of words, Beth. The episode ends with the family laughing about whether Beth really is or isn't a clone, leading all of us to question the same thing. You know, I always thought this was just going to be a throwaway gag that would never be mentioned again, but it does, and it gets fucking insane. Season 4 brings us Childrick of Mort. Rick bangs a planet which gives birth to millions of tiny Rick planet hybrids. Because her father once abandoned her, Beth forces Rick to go back and help the planet give birth, and in a way, raise its children. Raising the kids in this case really means building high-tech machines that automatically assign them roles in life. What stands out here is how well Beth and Rick work together. For the first time, Beth gets exactly what she always wanted, not just to spend time with her father doing his insane science projects, but to feel like she's earned his approval.
Look at you, my little steampunk overlord.
Let's now get to the season 4 finale, Star Mort, Return of the Jerry. Man, these titles are insane. We open up in space to see a version of Beth fighting against the Galactic Federation. Now, at first, this just seems like an alternate reality or something, but then...
Don't you ever miss Earth?
I don't have to miss it. I'm technically still there. My dad made a perfect clone of me to take my place.
Oh shit. Space Beth here then discovers what she thinks is a bomb planted in her neck. So she comes back to Earth, leading to a cool fight scene between her and Rick. She ends up cornering him, only for Rick to tell her to scan the clone. We see a similar device implanted in Earth Beth's neck. Rick claims this device would have transferred the clone's memories into Space Beth, but no, because she took it out, that's out the window. I also love that Space Beth gets upset that her clone is back with Jerry, with Rick stating that she is identical to her, meaning that deep down, Space Beth would have also potentially gone back to Jerry. After their misunderstanding, the two have lunch at Shoney's, where Rick finds out that Space Beth has been fighting in the war against the Gromplumites. He at first is worried, but then dismisses it, saying it's just a hero phase. But then then the Gromflamites show up on Earth, and Rick slips up.
Oh shit, they're gonna track down Beth.
You mean Beth's clone?
Right, Beth's clone. What did I say?
Okay, at this point, we have no clue who is or isn't the real Beth. After freezing Space Beth, Rick goes to save Beth and Jerry after Tammy and the Gromflamites ambush them, only for us to get some of the best exchanges in the show.
Wait, so there are two of them?
More importantly, which one is mine?
Neither. Chauvinist.
The two Beths are beamed up into a galactic spaceship and are held hostage. The two argue amongst themselves about the decisions they made and their different yet equal toxic idolization of Rick.
Beth, if one of you is still alive, you're my real daughter. If you're both alive, don't hurt the other one. She's just a clone. She's not worth it. I'm coming, baby.
That piece of shit.
As Rick battles with a cyberized bird person, Beth and Space Beth decide to kill Rick together, and the two bond after escaping. Bird person ends up cornering Rick, but thanks to the help of both Beths, they end up saving him. And so they all lived happily ever after. Right? Not exactly. Well, the family might, but Rick does not. See, it's revealed Rick, the bastard, mind blew himself after the cloning process, so he doesn't even know who the real Beth is. The rest of the family at this point does not give a shit anymore, with them just accepting that there's just another Beth in the family now. Rick puts on the mind blower helmet, and we are shown the off-screen events of the ABCs of Beth. See, we all initially thought that Beth, no matter what the decision was, made it herself. In truth,
I want you to decide.
What?
For once in my life, I want you to decide, Dad. Do you want me to stay here and be part of your life, or do you want me to leave?
in that moment, Beth slips back into that same pattern she's always had, giving her agency to Rick. Instead of making the decision herself, one that would fundamentally change her life, she asks Rick to choose for her because she wants him to act like a parent for once. Rick chooses to clone Beth, but not just that, he blindly shuffled them up so he is unaware of who the real Beth is. Absolute asshole. Now, I could go into why he does this, but I'd rather save that for an eventual Rick Sanchez character breakdown. Leave a comment down below if you guys want that. The point is, Rick sucks. Instead of helping Beth stay grounded with her family, he quite literally splits her consciousness into two, leaving her fundamentally fragmented. For season 5, I'm just gonna give you guys a bit of exposition that will be important for the episodes to come. In Rick Turnal Friendshine of the Spotless Mort, Rick enters Bird Person's mind in an attempt to bring him back. While there, he encounters a memory of himself, which I'll now refer to as Memory Rick. This version of Rick is much younger and noticeably more caring than the real one, because it reflects how a Bird Person remembers him. By the end, Memory Rick somehow transfers into Rick's own mind and continues to exist within his memories. Trust me, if I didn't explain who this guy was, things were gonna get really complicated, so just bear with me. In the season finale Rick Marijack, we learned that Beth and Jerry's relationship might not be all that it seems. See, this episode confirmed that the Citadel of Ricks has been tampering with timelines so that Mortys could be born. This means that throughout the multiverse, they have been secretly getting Beth and Jerry to hook up. It makes you wonder if our Jerry and Beth did accidentally have an unplanned pregnancy, or a version of Rick from the Citadel made that happen. Super creepy, I know. It once again reinforces the idea that Rick's existence makes it nearly impossible for Beth to ever fully make choices for herself. But let's get to the season 6 premiere, Solar Ricks. During the fallout of Evil Morty destroying the Citadel and portal travel as a whole, Rick, Morty, and Jerry are transported to the reality of origin. Space Beth, Beth, and Summer travel to the Citadel to set up a beacon that will get them home. At first, Space Beth is hesitant to go, revealing how unwilling she is to get attached to a family she pretty much abandoned. That tension carries through her conversation with Beth. Beth calls her clone a coward for leaving, while Space Beth rebuts that the cloning only happened because she cared in the first place. It becomes clear that their argument is fueled by jealousy over Summer's affection. By the end, Beth apologizes for being too uptight, and Space Beth admits she may be putting up too many walls. The adventure with Summer seems to remind her of what she's missing while living out in space. Space Beth now becomes a regular on the show. Unfortunately, this brings us to the episode Bethic Twinstinct. In this episode, the Beths begin to bond again, but a bit too much. After drinking this special Venusian wine, the two get horny for each other and begin hooking up. Beth decides to keep it a secret since at the beginning of the episode, Jerry said he'd kill himself if she left him. This line also pretty much sums up Beth as a character.
See, you act like you're this badass space cowboy, but I know you're just a scared little overachiever that keeps all her OCD right. Oh my god! Yeah.
Beth goes to Rick for advice, and they have a vague conversation about this special situation at hand. Rick hints that he may have done something similar with another version of himself, and surprisingly gives decent advice, telling her to think about how this might affect her family. Eventually, Eventually though, he snaps because the Beths are terrible at keeping their secret, and Morty insists they tell Jerry. Beth wants to, but Space Beth is cold and dismissive, arguing that they don't owe anyone anything, especially since this cloning shit wasn't even their fault. This creates a rift between the two, and Space Beth bluntly tells Jerry,
Jerry, I had sex with your wife.
causing him to curl up into a bug, a defense mechanism Rick installed for Jerry. This moment highlights a key difference between the two Beths. Space Beth openly despises Jerry, while Beth clearly still cares about him. Ultimately, their fight leads them to a crossroads. Despite, I guess, loving each other, they get Rick to memory wipe them.
Everyone around you, your father, your cuckold husband, your jaded children will just happily and silently bear the burden because it's more practical for them than the truth, and you don't care because it won't be your problem.
Solid repipe, Dad. Like he has a lifetime of experience as a selfish ass.
As Rick is about to do it, Jerry unrolls and tells them not to lobotomize themselves for his comfort. He admits he lied about killing himself and says he'd probably just cry and try to find a job. It is here that Jerry gets a rare W, and the episode ends with the three of them having a threesome. Later, it's revealed that it was the Venusian wine that caused the Beths to fall for each other, and Rick makes sure that it's never used again. Like most people, I didn't think much of this episode at first because of how strange the premise is. But after looking deeper into it, it's clear this episode is about avoidance and about questioning the line between self-love and narcissism. It's no secret that Beth has never truly loved herself, instead looking for that validation through Jerry, and more importantly, through Rick. Seeing herself physically allows her to recognize her own value. But there's another layer to it. Beth has always idolized her father and romanticized the idea of him leaving. Space Beth represents that same freedom Rick chose, abandoning responsibility to explore the universe. So by falling in love with Space Beth, she's actually repeating the same pattern she always has, recreating her relationship with Rick, only this time she gets to be on both sides of it, loving the person she wishes she were. Beth's action also mirror Rick's throughout the episode. It's fitting that he's forced to deal with the consequences of cloning her firsthand, especially since, at this point in the show, portal travel is broken and he can't just escape to another reality. It's a weird, uncomfortable episode, but one with some genuinely interesting ideas and themes. In season 7, I have to give some more exposition for the final season. In the Rick trap, we learn that Memory Rick, after Jerry and our Rick fused temporarily, made his way into Jerry's mind and is patiently biding his time until he can escape. In Unmort Rickin', we learn that Rick's wife and Beth's mom, Diane, didn't just die, she was erased from all reality by the worst Rick of them all, Rick Prime, using something called the Omega device. Go check out my character analysis on him if you haven't already, by the way. This will be important for when we get to the final episode. We now arrive at season 8 to the episode Valkyrick. See, there have been numerous episodes where Rick has spent some quality time with Beth, but not a lot with Space Beth. That's what this episode is. After she's forced to call Rick because she gets cornered by some Gromflamites, the two have a buddy cop adventure in taking down this rogue Gromflamite scientist. By the end, Space Beth and Rick grow much closer to each other, and they manage to somehow create a peace treaty with the Gromflamite Empire, once again showcasing how much of a good team they are, and leads directly into the next episode, the Curixus case of Beth, Jim, and Button. We open up with a really well shot montage scene showcasing the routine life of both Beths. The transitions here are extremely smooth and showcase that although they live completely different lives, one thing remains the same. They're both deeply unhappy. While the family goes off to some amusement park, the two speak about their current mental state and how they both thought having a clone would make things easier. They then mention that the last time they were actually happy was when they were kids. So Space Beth shows Beth a device that can turn them back into kids. The two of them do just that, and it is here that we see firsthand how insane and deranged Beth was as a child. This was hinted at in the episode ABCs of Beth. Their neighbor Gene, the poor jobber, gets roped into their mess as they quite literally try to assassinate him and burn down his house. This then causes a fight between the two, only for Rick to show up and parent their asses for once. It's actually refreshing to see Rick here be outsmarted by the Beths and the various traps they set up. Unfortunately, at the end, he falls for their biggest one. After containing both Beths, they manage to trick him and trap him in that age machine before turning him into a frail old man. They want him to get a taste of his own medicine. They beat the shit out of him, saying that they could leave him here just like he did to them when they were kids. This is by far one of the most heartbreaking and sincere scenes in the entire show. Rick here, with his frail body, says to the Beths that he is the one Rick who actually didn't leave. His Beth was killed by Rick Prime. The three of them start crying, yelling that now there are two of them and that he should love them twice as much. Rick weakly says that he's proud of them for turning him old and jumping his ass. Early in the show, as we've stated, Beth continued to deify Rick. As the seasons went on, she started to see him as nothing more than a selfish asshole. But here, she finally sees him as what he actually is, her father. Someone deeply flawed who, under different circumstances, might have been a good parent to her. In the end, the three of them hug and the Beths return to their everyday lives, this time with a clearer understanding of themselves and of Rick. For me, this solidifies the episode as one of the show's strongest, showing real character growth for both Beth and Rick. We now arrive at the most recent episode to come out of Rick and Morty, Hot Rick. See, Jerry here defends Rick out of nowhere, which is obviously extremely out of character, causing Rick to figure out what's going on instantly. He looks into Jerry's mind and finds Memory Rick changing a bunch of Jerry's memories in real time. The key point here is that he's changing memories, not the past, which means he's quite literally brainwashing Jerry. This concept is going to get complicated real fast, so I'm going to try my best to explain it. He ends up sucking Memory Rick out into some isolated ant farm mind before Summer says that she wishes she could suck out the bad memories of her exes. It's this line that causes Rick to do something completely unhinged. He decides to take the only memory of his wife, Diane, out of his mind and put her into some external brain so he can finally open up romantically. Later, Beth stumbles upon Rick's garage and Memory Rick manages to inject himself into her mind. Rick then tells the family that he took Diane out of his brain so that he can open up more. Memory Rick hears this in Beth's memories, so he does the worst possible thing he could ever do. He goes back to when she was a kid, the same day this version of Beth's Rick left, who for some reason looks like Rick Prime. That's a discussion for another day. And he essentially starts to raise her. But not just that, he tells Beth in her memories that she needs to find her mother, the memory version of her Rick removed, in that external brain in the basement of her house in the future. Yeah, apologies if I've lost you right now. Memory Rick infects a bunch of Beth's memories and even trains her to fight in her mind, constantly repeating to her,
"This is how we stay a family."
An important thing I want to highlight about Beth's memories is that we see she can't even remember her mother clearly. She can hear her voice, yes, but she can only see a vague projection of her. This not only shows the effect of the Omega device, but also works as an allegory for how grief can distort memory, especially when it comes to lost parents. In the present, Beth finds the memory prison Memory Rick kept talking about, where these two sort of reunite. After this, Space Beth confronts Beth, sensing that something isn't right, and the two fight. The confrontation highlights how powerful memories are and how deeply they shape who we become. Because Beth remembers being trained by Memory Rick, she's able to hold her own against Space Beth, even though realistically she shouldn't stand a chance. Now there's one thing I wanted to mention. Up until this point in the season, there hasn't been much in the way of major story development. There was this episode, but most of the episodes have been standalone, which has largely been the case since Rick Prime was killed. So I was really hoping this season finale could give us something insane, and quite frankly, it did.
This is how we stay a family!
I lost my shit seeing this. I was convinced that Space Beth was going to stay dead, and that it would serve as a major turning point for both Beth's character and the show. Despite that not being the case, as we'll see, it still does. After Beth runs off in a dazed panic, Memory Rick explains the situation to Memory Diane, who accidentally interacts with a memory of Beth. Her real mistake comes when she tells that version of Beth that she's only a memory, the worst thing she could do. Memory Rick then explains that once a memory becomes aware of itself, it wakes up and starts becoming sentient. Then a full-on war occurs in Beth's mind. Earlier memories of Beth come together to chase down Memory Rick, since he's been technically brainwashing her for years. Memory Rick and Memory Diane try to go to the most recent memory of Beth's so that they can try and talk to her in real time. Meanwhile, Rick comes home to see Space Beth, and thankfully, because she has a robotic spine, he revives her, and the two go after Beth. Things go from bad to worse as her mind begins filling with memories of herself trying to kill Memory Rick, until finally, Beth in the real world decides that there's only one way to end it.
This is how we stay a family!
Rick, however, catches her at the last minute and she collapses before taking Space Beth's gun to end it all. In her mind, we see her memory versions threatening Memory Rick for brainwashing her, his own daughter. Beth in real time explains that she hears so many voices and that she somehow loves Rick and hates him at the same time. Real Rick approaches her and apologizes for not being there for her while she grew up, and that he's here now to make things right. But after they embrace each other, he injects her. The next scene we see is really important. Beth admits she wishes she could have known her mother. Rick tells her that she does because Diane raised her, but because of the Omega device, Beth can't truly remember her. This is exemplified through the projection we saw in an earlier memory of hers. Rick even points out that the only piece of Diane he had left was the fragment we saw running around with Memory Rick. He explains that Beth's real mother loved her more than any memory ever could. All Beth can do is quietly respond,
Guess I'll have to take your word for it.
With that, Rick resets Beth's mind. As of now, this stands as the last major episode focused on Beth. While there is more to unpack in the ending, it has more to do with Rick than with her, but I'll touch a little bit on it shortly. Beth Smith's story is one about belonging, identity, and choice. A majority of her story has to do with dealing with a marriage that she, at first, never wanted, and a father whom she both loved and hated at the same time. While she is shown to be extremely toxic in the way she raises her kids and treats her husband, she's easily one of the most complex and human characters in the show. She reminds me a lot of Skylar White from Breaking Bad.
I gave it to Ted.
Like Skylar, Beth is often treated as the problem simply for reacting to a life she never fully chose. I never understood why so many people hated Skylar when she was forced into such an impossible position all because of her egomaniac husband. In Beth's case, her father Rick is the one who's ultimately responsible for a lot of the damage she sustained. Whether it's an alternate version of himself erasing Diane from existence, or him constantly meddling in her marriage.
I think a blind man could see that Beth is looking for the door. I barely have a reason to care, and even I notice.
That's not to say Beth should be absolved of all responsibility. We can't always blame someone's past for their present actions, but it can help us understand them better. Beth had to deal with both her parents disappearing before her very eyes at a very young age, then put herself through years of school to become a horse surgeon while raising a 17-year-old daughter. While Dan Harmon says her becoming a horse surgeon shows her cutting corners, it also shows how she had to shape her idea of success around the damage she never had the time to deal with. I like that gradually her resentment for Jerry and her love for Rick both lessen as the seasons go on. Harmon has stated that Beth originally hated her mother, but as we see in Hot Rick, she's finally confronted with the harsh truth that her mother was the one who truly raised her. But unfortunately, that revelation doesn't mean much to Beth because she can't exactly remember her. What separates Beth from someone like Skylar is that Skylar eventually gets the truth. By the end of Breaking Bad, she finally hears Walter White admit that everything he did was for himself, not for the family. That moment might not fix anything, but it definitely gives Skylar clarity and a little bit of closure. Beth unfortunately doesn't get that, at least for now. By the end of the episode, Rick says to the family that he got rid of Memory Rick and Diane, but as we see at the end, he actually chose to spare them and let them live in a memory world forever. Beth is denied the honesty from Rick that might help her cope and move on. We'll see if this ever gets brought up again as the show continues. See, in my Marceline character breakdown, I noted that despite the heartache she's gone through, a big thing that helped her grow was memory. Rick and Morty, however, has a more nihilistic take on memory, framing it as a painful illusion, something we cling to not because it's true, but because it's all we have. And that's what makes Beth's story so tragic. She spent her entire life trying to figure out who she's supposed to be, while standing on ground that keeps changing under her feet. Her memories of her parents are fractured, her sense of family feels broken, and even her own identity is something Rick felt entitled to split into two. By cloning her, Rick stripped her of choice once more, something she never truly had. Rick pretty much turned her life into a question she can never fully answer. Every choice Beth makes feels uncertain, so for her to become someone feels deeply exhausting. It means constantly measuring herself against who she was, who she could have been, and who she might still turn into. That pressure to define herself without certainty or closure is what Beth constantly carries with her, the burden of becoming. If you made it to the end of this video, I want to thank you wholeheartedly. If you are new around here, please subscribe. I plan to make more character breakdowns like this in the future. Following Beth's journey was a lot of fun, and it only gets me more excited to see what the writers come up with for her story going forward. I wanted to thank you guys again for 200,000 subscribers. This is a huge achievement, and like I said, it's one I never thought I would reach. To thank you guys, I will be doing a Finn character breakdown in March, but hopefully for my next video later this month, I will be doing a Huntress character analysis. Also, if you're still here, don't click off just yet, as I wanted to ask you guys to follow my Instagram and my TikTok. Unfortunately, with AI becoming extremely rampant and causing some YouTube accounts to get banned for no real reason, it really worries me for the future of this channel. I don't want this community to die out, so please follow me on all my other socials. And if you see anyone stealing my content on TikTok, I would greatly appreciate it if you could just comment that this is my content. It sucks to see some of these videos get so many views while they cut off my watermark. If you want to support me further, please consider joining my Patreon, and also join my Discord server if you want to interact with me. If you like the way I tell stories, consider grabbing my book The Shattered Absolution, heavily inspired by the characters and shows I cover. And I want to thank you once again for watching.